Good evening. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater, home of public programs for the UCLA Film and Television Archive. My name is Maya Montañez Smukler. I'm head of the Archives Research and Study Center located on campus. Thank you for joining us tonight as part of our Archives Treasures series for a very special screening of the feature film Legacy from 1974. All of the archive screenings in the Wilder Theater are free thanks to a gift from an anonymous donor, and we are grateful for their support. Special thanks to our community partners for tonight's screening, the American Film Institute, Women in Media, and the UCLA Center for the Study of Women and the Barbra Streisand Center. After tonight's screening, there will be a Q&A with Paula Chambers, daughter of screenwriter and actor Joan Hotchkis, director and producer Karen Arthur, editor Carol Littleton, and composer Roger Kellaway. You are permitted to take photos of any of the onstage conversations, but please put away your phones during the screening. An update on our programming schedule. The Archives public programs will be taking a summer intermission. Our screenings will be on pause until early October, when we'll return to the Billy Wilder Theater with an exciting lineup of programs and special guests. So if you're not already signed up for our email newsletter, please do so, or follow us on social media for updates. We have a wonderful panel of guests tonight who are going to tell us all about the making of this extraordinary film. Like shaking, we just had this great dinner in the green room where everyone was just remembering the making of this film 50 years ago, and I just can't wait for them to share all the stories. Has anybody seen this film before? Who didn't work on the film? Okay, so a couple, but for most of you, it's a first time, so that is just thrilling. So just a little bit of historical context. Legacy originated as a one-woman show in 1973, written and performed by Joan Hotchkis. Hotchkis, who passed away in 2022 at the age of 95, was during the early 70s a versatile talent known by a broad audience for her celebrated roles on television series such as The Odd Couple and The Life and Times of Eddie Roberts. Karen Arthur, at the time looking to make her first feature film, saw Hotchkis' stage production of Legacy and convinced the actor to adapt the screenplay and star in the film. Legacy and Hotchkis explore the complex subjectivity of its female protagonist in characterizations that reflect in many ways the feminist consciousness raising taking place during the 1970s. Throughout the 70s, Hollywood grappled with feminism as a political movement, as a social revolution, and a commercial commodity in which the industry could attempt to exploit. While the women's movement challenged and changed all aspects of American society legally and culturally, by many accounts, sexism and misogyny peaked in the film industry during this period, on screen and behind the camera. In 1973, Molly Haskell published her canonical book, From Reverence to Rape, The Treatment of Women in the Movies, and expressed a strong disgust with Hollywood's relationship to women, describing how, from a woman's point of view, the 10 years from, say, 1962 or 1963 to 1973 have been the most disheartening in screen history. Haskell continues, in the roles and prominence accorded to women, the decade began unpromisingly, grew steadily worse, and at present shows no sign of improving. That's Haskell writing in 1973. Over the course of the 70s, a cinematic trend described often as the new woman film began to emerge that explored and responded to themes and characterizations influenced by second-wave feminism. A roster of major film studio releases that crossed genders. Many were successful at the box office and with critics, others hidden gems. Just a short list might include Jane Fonda in Clute, Diane Carroll in Claudine, Catherine Ross in Stepford Wives, Diana Ross in Mahogany, Lily Tomlin in Moment by Moment, and Jill Clayburgh in An Unmarried Woman. And that's just to name a few. A variety of independent productions followed suit with films like Barbara Loden's Wanda, Diana Sands in Georgia, Georgia, Jenna Rollins in A Woman Under the Influence, Melanie Mayron in Girlfriends. The new woman film centered on a variety of women protagonists who were stumbling and searching for autonomy, self-identity, and struggling for independence, whether it be financial, professional, emotional, and frequently within, is somebody laughing? And frequently with this is such a dire intro, and I'm sorry, but the 70s was a tough time. But as we'll see in this film, it was tough and extraordinary and artistic and so creative. So in these films, female characters are stumbling and searching for autonomy, self-identity, struggling for independence, whether it be financial, professional, emotional, and frequently within the Hollywood prescribed confines of heterosexual romances. So Legacy was independently produced and financed and without a deal for domestic distribution in the U.S. theatrical market. Hotchkis, a seasoned performer, collaborated with a team early in what would be a set of long and impressive careers, Karen Arthur, Carol Littleton, cinematographer John Bailey, and Roger Kellaway, to create a film that was of its time and how it pushed against cinematic and cultural expectations. So please enjoy Legacy, and please stick around for the Q&A right after. Thank you. When was the last time, Karen, that you saw this with an audience?
I don't even remember. It's been so long ago.
Yeah. You first saw it as the stage performance.
Yes,
yes.
Yes.
What was that experience like, and how did you decide that it should be reinterpreted in a cinematic form?
Well, when you're a filmmaker, you're always looking for a new subject. And I was a theater person, so I always go to the theater, and I saw this piece at the Actors Studio, and it wiped me out. I mean, Joan is extraordinary, is she not? I mean, is that not a performance? And it was so stunning, and at that time, I had met John Bailey, and I said, I'm looking for something, I want to do a film, and he said, oh, I want to do it with you. And I went backstage to Joan, and I said, I'll give you a legal $1, and I want to get the rights to the film. And she said, okay, and we started working on it. And then John said, oh, this is so great, because my wife, Carol, she's an editor. So we had a DP, we had an editor, and Roger and I are stepmother and stepfather to the same kid. And so we knew each other from way back when. And so I contacted Roger. So then none of us had made a film before. So this was our first film. And the four of us, Johnny is not here with us, but the four of us went on to make Mafu Cage. So we made 2 seminal films and Roger and Carol and John were on those, right, Roger?
Yes. And wonderful experiences. I'm exhausted. I can't, you know what I can't believe? Some of those scenes that are in they're one shot. Oh my God. So anyway, I thank you we've had some wonderful times together, and this was one of them.
Yes, it was.
Well, Paula, maybe you can help us understand a little bit of your mother's artistic practice. By the time she makes this film, she's known to a broad television audience for being on shows like The Odd Couple, comedies, broad comedies that millions of people will have seen. So she's moving between different kinds of projects, different kinds of performance style. Share with us your insights into what her artistic practice was and just her ability and her range.
Well, considering that I was born in 1962, I was 12 when this film was filmed and 13 when it was released. So when she and I started our life in Los Angeles in 1967, after she had lived in New York for some time, and that's where I was born in 62. But in 67, she split with my father, and she and I moved to Los Angeles. It was back to LA for her. She was from LA. So my vantage point was from that of a child. I just noticed that my mom was always in acting class, always in rehearsal with some actor who had come over on Mondays and Wednesdays. She would work with Eric Morris. He was wanting to write his first book, and he didn't have confidence that he could write a book. She wanted to write and produce her first play. She didn't have confidence about that, so on Mondays they would get together and work on his book, and on Wednesdays they would work on Legacy. My experience of it, to be honest with you, was of mostly my mother having something to do that was a lot more interesting than be with me. Artists, that's how artists are, devoted artists who really have to do their art. I mean, I understand this now, that artists gotta art, and she arted very hard.
Karen, what was the approach to adapting this to the screen? How did you first let's just talk about the cinematography. How did you and John Bailey strategize to how to make a feature film with basically one character, one performer, and keep it so energetic?
Well, we knew that we wanted to open it up. We knew that we wanted to use a lot of locations, and that we wanted to have other actors in it so we could flesh out those moments. And John and I, we would always go to museums because he was quite the artist, quite articulate. And we would look at paintings and things and say, oh, well, this is the way we want this scene to look or that scene to look. And I knew we needed a location that was close to Mother's house. And when I would go over to Joni's house, the pool, that was Joan's mother's house, and Joan's mother would swim naked every morning. And I saw that, and I went, that's our opening. And then I wanted a home that we could use as a location that was very close so that you could see her get in the car, drive, and then get out at her house. And so I started walking around the neighborhood in Pasadena and knock, knock, hi, I'm Karen Arthur. I'm making a movie. Can I use your house? And of course, I got a lot of doors slammed. But then finally this one woman looked possible, and I gave her the screenplay, and I said, we'll talk. And she called me that night, and she said, Karen, I have just read this screenplay. I am 2 months away from Nebutal and orange juice. And my husband and I have doorbell sex. Yes, you can have my house for free, and I will invest. And that's how we started.
How did you decide to bring in, and perhaps this, with some of the collaboration with Joan, how did you decide to bring in other characters into in the flashbacks?
Well, she would talk of those characters and speak to them in her monologue. So it was all there. It was just we added the people to give it that other part of the life. And because Joan is so funny, and then it's so tragic, you go from those two tones, which I know I could hear people were appreciating her humor. And but it helped to flesh it out so that in visual terms you could sense the husband and the little boy, Rebbe, and Timmy, I guess his name is. Real little boy is Rebbe. And then, of course, Carol came into our lives and began to edit. And she was so funny. Every time there was a scene that we cut out of the film, she would give it to me to hold so I wouldn't be upset. I could hold it, but it would never be in the film again, right? Tell us, Carol.
Well, yes, that is true. But in a more serious vein, I think every director who looks at a first cut of any kind, he instantly has a heart attack, and Karen's a little bit like that. And I said, don't worry, we're going to go through the film, we'll consider every scene, we'll look at Joan's performance, make sure it's the very, very best. And, if you ever want to put anything back in, you can do it, but, we'll evaluate it very carefully. At a certain point, we realized, or at least I had very strong feelings about certain scenes just didn't need to be in the film. And I'd give it to Karen so she could keep it at least near her heart, if not in the movie. So that's the way we solved a lot of problems. Although I'd have to say that Karen allowed Joan to fulfill every scene to its highest peak. And usually there were several takes, if we could afford them, at different calibers of emotional intensity. And so we would go through them very carefully and make sure that everything would actually have a progression from one moment to the next. And I realized that we're working with Karen, which is the first film that I did. I was just working in a crazy little house that did industrials and interview films, things like that, that Karen actually placed the bar very high for all of us. So we had certain expectations as well. So we became a good team, repeated it again on Mafu Cage, which was perhaps even more outrageous. certainly for Roger. And I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the fun of the film, at least for us in the cutting room, and Karen was my assistant, which is highly unusual, that we literally let essentially Joan guide us through each one of her takes, each part. We decided right away that we weren't going to make many cuts. It was going to be very clean and as simple as possible, because then you could really see how she would modulate from one moment to the next. Just an extraordinary actor, great writer, and hope that we did her proud.
I think we did, and I want to hand it back to Roger, because as you can hear in the score, Roger is being, his instruments are being her inner life, and he leads us as to when she's disintegrating or when she's healthy or whatever. And how did you do that, Roger?
I became neurotic. But I haven't heard this score in 50 years. And I don't think I've ever done another film, maybe Mafu, where the score has so many moments of counterpoint that are going on with the scene. It's like so I'm listening and I'm viewing the entire overview of whatever the scenes are, and okay, I like the score.
I have a funny story about UCLA, because a lot of this started at UCLA, and so it's very close to us. But Big John and I decided in the masturbation scene, because Yoshimata was Japanese, and that we wanted to make it as erotic as we could, so we went to UCLA to the archives, and we photographed all of these Japanese erotic prints. And so every time she would reach back, we would cut to or dissolve to one of those great Japanese things where the kimono is over and his big thing is coming towards her and all of that. And so the whole ballet of the masturbation was intercut with these wonderful Japanese prints. And so what happened, Carol? We showed it to the audience.
It was a kind of rejection. We realized that was perhaps wonderful for us because it was an interesting exercise, but it wasn't going to work for the film.
So that was one of the scenes that Karen then
Karen
got
had
to hold.
Yes, she got
The
to hold.
Japanese prints.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the representation of sexuality, and it's. I mean, this is the 70s, so there's certainly more representations of sexuality with an emphasis on female sexuality in Hollywood films, and nudity. But this is challenging that a little bit. She's speaking so frankly about her very personal and honest experience and opinions around sex. But is it erotic? I don't know. Maybe that's one of the questions. Is how did you and Joan sort of want to explore what was the intention in her character talking so much about her sexuality, and then how did you handle the rating board?
Well, the masturbation scene was in the play, and what we really wanted to show was this woman was trying so hard to take care of herself and to give herself pleasure, and she couldn't even give herself pleasure. So the scene is not about the sexuality, it's more in her head, and then the frustration at the end when she can't even climax, and how it's all to nothing. And the same way when he can't find my clitoris, and then he's got to push her down under the covers at night to where she can't breathe. So it was never meant to be erotic or anything like that. It was meant to be free, a woman trying to pleasure herself and can't even do that. And so when we got ready to put the film out, we got an X rating, which of course is deadly if you're trying to do a commercial film or to put it out into the theaters. And so through AFI, I met a gentleman who took me to the ratings board and had dinner with he and his wife and some critics. And somehow we got an R. And Carol and I can't remember what we had to cut. We can't remember at all, but it was that minute.
Because they had never seen the erotic photographs, or the
Oh, no,
photographs.
that
was gone
Oh,
already.
that was gone, yeah. We would definitely have a double X if we'd done that one. Yeah, no. Mm-mm.
I just remember it was a very simple lift. It was just a very simple lift where you could just take literally one angle and cut to the next one, and that was it. It was just a simple nick. Yeah. And I think they just wanted to go through. I think it was a favor, perhaps, I don't know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They saw the film and you know, I feel how important it was, but sometimes it's just, you know, bowing to their demand and then that's it.
Yeah.
Paula, tell us a little bit about your mother and just her body of work and how important exploring a woman's sexuality, whether it's hers or she's characterizing, how important sexuality was to her work as an artist.
All of the themes in Legacy are all really essential to her body of work as an artist. After making Legacy, she continued doing television for a while, and then she went back to theater in the 80s, and then in the late 80s, she morphed into a performance artist. Performance artist different from theater. It breaks many of the conventions of theater, and it's often solo works, often representing a point of view that is marginalized. Gay people, black people, and so she became a performance artist, even though she herself was not from a marginalized group, unless you count women. Which of course you should. But anyway, so her first performance artwork was called Tear Sheets, or Letters I Didn't Send Home. And Tear Sheets was both a love poem to the California ranching culture from which she came, and it was also an unmasking. It was a revelation of the sexism, racism, and brutality underlying that culture, which is superficially beautiful and which included people she loved. So Tear Sheets was a feminist exploration of patrician culture in Southern California, ranching families like the one that she grew up in. And then her next work, 1996, she did Tear Sheets when she was 65. And then when she was 67, she wrote Elements of Flesh, or Screwing Saved My Ass. These were both performed at Highways Performance Space in Santa Monica, a great hotbed of performance art, and she toured them many other places as well. Elements of Flesh was the most personal of all of her works, and it's all about aging and sexuality. Sex has always been very important to my mother as a person. It was when she had sex, it was the only time she could feel free from the pain of the abuse that she experienced in childhood from her father. She was never incested. It was not sexual abuse, but he would frighten her and scare her and and jump out, or gross her out. He was trying to toughen her up. It's so 1930s. But anyway, she was very traumatized by her upbringing, and when Joan had sex, all of that melted away, and she was happy and in pleasure, and so sex was very important to her. And as she aged, she found fewer partners, and so Elements of Flesh is the last line is, "I will not go unfucked to my grave."
I don't know how to follow up with another question.
So
thank
all of
you,
these
Joan. That
things,
was
the
great.
patrician culture, the takedown of the sexism of patrician culture, the glorifying and exploring of sexuality, the sexuality as an antidote to psychological pain, all of those are really critical themes in her entire body of work.
Karen, how did you, this is such an independent film, it's your first film. You had made a short film here at UCLA just previous to that. And how did you raise money, and when the film was finished, what was your plan to get it into distribution?
Well, I was at AFI at the time, and I kept trying to get them to give me a grant, and they wouldn't do it, and they wouldn't do it. And so I finally said, I'm going to try one more time, and if not, you got to give me a gold watch at least, But I raised it independently enough to get the film shot. And then we didn't have the money for the editing, so Carol was waiting in the wings. And I thought, well, AFI gave us a screening possibility so we could get people in so I could ask them for money. And I thought, there's this wealthy man in Palm Beach that I used to know, George England. I'll call him. I'll get him to come. He'll know somebody. And so he came, half hour late, in his tennis togs and tennis racket, came in, watched a little bit of the film, and left early. So I didn't even get to talk to him. And I thought, well, that's wasted. And then he called me that night, and he said, I want you to be at 20th Century Fox tomorrow at 2 o'clock, projection room, whatever. So I went, and I could only see from the projection booth these heads, so I had no idea who was there. So when I walked into the room afterwards to greet everybody, there was George England and his wife, Cloris Leachman, and Rogers and Cowan, the real Rogers and Cowan, and Stuart Stern, and Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. And they said, we adore your film, and they all pulled out checkbooks, and right there, signed me checks, and Carol could go to work.
I have a question about that. What did they see if the film hadn't been edited yet?
Well, it was put together, but we hadn't gotten into the music. We hadn't gotten into the laboratory work. We hadn't done all of the finishing things where it costs the real money. We had enough money to put Carol on, but not to do the whole piece. So they saw a very rough cut, right, babe?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Literally one track in the picture. I mean, we just really didn't have any money for anything else. So it was kind of like that. Yeah, one. With all the dissolves were with a grease pencil and old time filmmaking, 16 millimeter.
16, and then we blew to 35 eventually. Yeah.
Let's open for a couple of questions. Wait for the microphone. So there is a person right here with glasses.
Hi. I really loved I loved hearing that the woman who owned the house in Pasadena really related to that screenplay. And so I'm really curious how this was received by the public as a play and how it was received by the public as a film, what not necessarily the reviews, but actual, audience members.
Do you want to start, Paula, with the play?
I'll briefly comment about how it was received as a play. When Eric and my mother co-produced it, sharing the cost 50-50, they put it on at the Actors Studio West in Los Angeles and at several other venues in the city. And they always sought comments from the audience. And one comment in particular, Eric saw fit to mention to me today. He said that this one woman said, she was an actor, and she said, how, as a director, can you allow her to scream like that? It's just so, it's so ouch. And he said, it is not my role, the way I work, to allow or disallow any expression on the part of the actor. If they are experiencing the emotion that is true to the character in that moment, then whatever their body and their voice does is acceptable and desirable because it is organic. So that is part of how Eric helped her develop the character. He helped her identify in her own life. I mean, this picture is not autobiographical, but there are scraps and shreds and shards of my mother's actual emotional life that are woven in, used strategically like a collage of emotional life for Bissy Hapgood.
Yeah, as a film, we had no luck in the United States. We had it at the Paris Theater in New York, and Vincent Canby trashed it. And so consequently, it kind of ruined our experience in the States. But in Europe, it was wildly received. I think we played in something like 45 countries, and I was there in Tehran with an entire audience of men, because women weren't allowed in the theater, and I thought, this is going to be a disaster. But you know what? They laughed at the funny lines, and they got the humor, and at the end there was just huge applause, and they talked about how much it touched them, and these were all the men. But to answer your question, what I saw over and over again was women would come up, and men, and say, oh my God, thank you guys for making this, because I have never seen this kind of expression of my life and what I'm going through. And I think that's something that we were all wondering about today, because you're an audience 50 years later, and you know the diatribe at the end, the other that she takes on, right? And she's angry at the blacks and the this and the that. And it's so relevant today of this whole break apart that we have in our country. And she was so prescient. She was way ahead in understanding that that's where the anger goes. Those are the people who they blame, these wonderful white people, who live in the White House on the Hill. And God forbid the colored man is going to open the menstruation napkins, So she was so brave. The film was brave in those days. And I'm really curious as to, we all were, as to how today you all relate to it. This old girl of 52 years,
Any response to Karen? Or perhaps another question? Oh, right here, also on the same side. Please wait for the mic. Thank you.
Hi, yes, definitely that is worth a response, but I just wanted to ask, as a director, since this had already been directed and explored on stage with the actress, you walk in as a director, how did you manage that? Did you change things? Did you base it off of the show? Because that's a sort of a whole nother layer onto something that is so viscerally baked in. So I'm really curious about your process with that.
Well, Joni and I talked about that a lot, and I've adapted many, many films from plays, because I come from the theater originally, and where the word is all. And there were just things emotionally that we felt we wanted to twist or change. And the minute you bring another actor into a scene, another whole thing happens to an actor, because now they have to relate. And the other actors would do things that Joan didn't expect, because, of course, she was playing to a solo situation in the play. So all of that changed the texture and changed the timing and changed the way she was perceived. And of course, I, as a director, I'm interested in the mise en scène and interested in all of the pieces, whether it's locations or lighting or music or editing, rhythms and everything. And that's where the film kind of gets its life. and her reality, because Joan was so good, you know, we could really, like Big John and I chose to be back, kind of watching it, and then as you see, very, very slowly go in, so that her emotions get more punctuated. In the theater, of course, you're way back here, but to finally get up there, and then you can really see Joan's brilliance, the nuances of how she transitions from one thing to another. So it's close-ups are magic when you want to talk about disintegration or seeing the inner life that you don't see in a play. It's just too damn far away, I think. But
I wonder, Roger, if you can add to that how you included the score to sort of match and connect with what Karen's describing.
Well, you know, in doing music for a film, you know, you read the script and you see the film, and then you meet usually with the director or the producer, and you do what's called spotting. And in spotting, you find each place where you both agree about where music should be and what the frame is that's going to start it and the frame that's going to end it. The emotional quality of the score, I don't know what to say. Some of those cues are some of the most out cues I've ever done, and you liked it. So somehow it all works. But really, I got neurotic. I did.
Other questions? Down here in the middle. Thank you.
Maya, if I could
yeah,
add
go
one
ahead.
word to that.
Yeah.
You know, sitting in the cutting room and looking at dailies and, you know, trying to figure out how the best way to put it together. And obviously we discovered the simplest, most straightforward way was not only the most economical, but the distillation of what Joan was doing was most laid out so that one could interpret it. We were not directing it to have a particular emotion. We were letting Joan sort of absorb the emotional life. And so we were very careful about that. And the motion, the literal, it's a motion picture, it's not on the stage. So the very subtle moves in and out, and you know, the counter moves back and forth, the composition, the natural lighting, the sense that it's very, perhaps in a cluttered home, but the film is not cluttered. Mm-hmm. That particular approach to a film, I felt just lifted the whole thing, and I was just amazed today. We were babies in all of this. We didn't necessarily know what we were doing, but there was an instinct about the material that lent itself to that kind of simplicity. And simplicity is difficult. It's very, very difficult. So we were learning as we were doing.
Well, and Joan is so charismatic, and as you were saying, Karen, that like in just 1 second she can go from sobbing to her face lights up and she's making a joke, and the audience is right there with her, hitting those highs and lows. Somebody down here? Oh. Yeah, and you have the mic right.
That's very interesting what you were saying. I just wanted to go back to the last diatribe and the pain that she's experiencing through the whole piece that comes out that way. Just made me think of how prescient it is that pain gets turned into this anger that goes outward as much as it goes inward. And that was just so, that was so potent and so powerful then and now, that when it was made, and to feel it now. And I just wanted to commend all of you for the courage to make the film, because wow, so much. And then I just wanted to ask you, Paula, did you see the film when it first came out?
I think I did. My mom was very permissive about letting me see material that many parents would not have let their child see. I was allowed to see the musical Hair when I was 7 or 8 years old, so there's the nudity. I think, do you happen to remember, Karen, if I was there for any of the early screenings? You probably don't.
I don't.
I believe I saw it fairly soon after it was completed. I've seen it maybe twice since then and now tonight. I haven't seen it for about 10 years. And what strikes me about it today is how, about the final diatribe, which is the beginning of your question, it feels just bracingly modern to me, bracingly contemporary. I can feel the anger of a certain segment of American society just spewing forth, spewing in that monologue. And it just shows, we know those elements of that rage have been around for a long time. And I feel that my mother was kind of, as a writer and as an actor, lancing the boil of American rot and rage.
This is the first film that the three of you make, and you go on, as you described yourselves, making this film as babies, and you all go on to just incredible careers, just so productive. Episodic television, Karen, you win a Emmy for directing Cagney and Lacey, a couple other films, but so many television movies, documentaries. Roger and Carol, you both just have incredible careers, and working on films that are and television that are major productions, major motion pictures. What does it mean that you started with this super indie film that was really so radical? Even, as much as the mythology of the 70s is that Hollywood was falling apart and presenting a whole new way of looking at movies and creating movies. I mean, this is still very outside of Hollywood, although it's part of the mythology of the 70s.
And very much so, but it was four of us because John Bailey was our cinematographer. And then when the four of us got together again, we made even a much more radical film, which is Mafu Cage. And Mafu has caught on. I was telling Maya that MoMA showed it a couple of years ago, and then it goes around, and then it started moving around, and so it's playing all over, and it played in Paris just recently, and they said at the time, we'd like Legacy next year. So we'll see if we go, but I would love to think that Legacy started now here at UCLA, where it's only appropriate, it should have. And then hopefully the buzz will go around and maybe Legacy will get another life as Mafu has, So 50 years old, maybe.
Carol, you had something.
Yeah, I just, certain amount of I guess, ignorance is bliss for sure. But Karen had extraordinary courage to do this film and the next one. And that courage just continued throughout her career. I just want to point out one thing, that from the time that Ada Lupino, who was a renowned woman director, got her card at the DGA, Karen was the second woman director who got her card from the DGA. So if you speak of courage, there she is personified.
Well, I think that's...
Back at you, girlfriend. And you.
And Joan, too. This is a really special to be able to honor Joan's legacy with this film and with all of you and with Paula, to be able to celebrate your mom and her and just her
courage.
And her
courage as an artist to lance that boil, to be that brave, and then to keep exposing things that bothered her through her art for the rest of her life.
And we also have to be aware that people like Maya find us and remember us and hold on to that memory for a long enough time and then say, oh, I have an opportunity to expose this. So the people who understand and got it, that they stand behind that, it's the great blessing. So thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. This is the pleasure of what the UCLA Film and Television Archive gets to do. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great summer, and come back to the theater with us in October. Thanks, everyone.